Well, hello and welcome to the Old Man Orange podcast. I'm Spencer Scott Holmes, and now I got super special guest Jack Foster right here. Jack, how you doing?
Doing great. Thank you so much. Thank you for for having me back, and then B, for the highly coveted position of guest hosting while Ryan is what is he in jail?
Well, it might be something similar where you're really restricted on time, but yeah, Ryan's on the hiatus for a good while. He just had a kid, a baby boy born, maybe 2 weeks pre this recording or so.
Oh wow.
So yes, the last podcast we had was kind of like a little send-off one here, and then I was like, well, I'm gonna keep it going no matter what. And then I was like, you know what I kind of really want to do, something that I've thought about for a good long time, is I wanted to do what I kind of dub the vintage cinema review of doing, really old movies. It's like sometimes you explain that to somebody at first, and they're like, oh yeah, so like 80s, maybe 70s. It's like, no, 30s to 70s. It's like the criteria. I want really old stuff. I've always really dug, all kinds of genres of film. I mean, I love the 1930s, and that's why we're talking about this one here as we get into it in a moment. But
can I pause you there for a second?
Yeah.
Because we had a conversation off air, and what do they call that? Is that talking? So we were talking.
Yeah. If it's not being recorded, it doesn't really have a total purpose. It's kind of
exactly. Yeah, it doesn't even exist. We were having a conversation off air, and because you had mentioned hey, I want to do some older movies, and I was like, oh great, we're gonna do Jaws, and then you were like, no, in the 30s, and so we were kind of talking about it, and I just want to say this, we are on the internet. There's a whole species of the whole film Twitter dude who I nothing but love. There's no hate coming from me to the film Twitter or screenwriter Twitter or that whole arm of social media. But there's this whole species of dude whose whole personality is look, I love movies. I've been watching movies. I watch movies with a critical eye. I have a Letterboxd account. I write reviews of movies. I'm a film guy. I can I'll rattle off about cinematographers, and when I talk about movies, I call them films. Their whole personality is movie. And I think none of these dudes have seen a movie before 1976. We were talking, and I was floored at your not just deep knowledge, you had taken a film studies class or something and you had tapped on, but you're true passion, for you were the whole decade of the 30s. I love in cinema. And I was sort of in my own mental inventory being oh no, I've seen, let's see, The Wizard of Oz. And so I think this is not an unearned I think and that's right, not to put you in the hot seat or to shine the spotlight on you, but I think that is it is so commendable. What I love in the world is when you come across somebody and they have just a deep interest and a deep passion, and it is something so lots of people like baseball. And every now and then you'll get someone who's I specialize in Negro leagues, but someone is sort of got just such a specific, what, I only like cricket from 1920 to 1963. It's just so specific, and it also just so not universal. But then that kind of proves how true the love must be for it, because to have that passion for something, you have to another side conversation, not to reveal how the sausage gets made, but was hey, is this streaming anywhere? And it was one of those things where I was am I gonna have to airdrop a Blu-ray? So it was it's not easy to stumble across in the wild either. So I just mad props for that. That is that's a true mark of character.
Well, I thought about that too. I was like, oh yeah, when I pick some of these movies, I should probably make sure that everybody else is able to watch them. Because some of these sets, let's be honest, they might only release them once on DVD or Blu-ray, and they might get kind of expensive later on too. And then people aren't clamoring to have some of these 1930s movies on their Netflix queue anytime soon.
No, I think that is although I will say this is a better time than ever, because I think you can and I was helping a friend's podcast. We were doing comics, and
Hmm.
if there's anything you're looking for, you can go on eBay and you can find like a down and dirty copy of it for, $2 or $3. Like we're in this kind of like, especially now that I think everything is sort of, there's this idea, asterisk, maybe it's not actually true, that everything is sort of moving to the cloud and uploaded to the cloud and digitally available in some form or another. And in that theory, like it's sort of like it's made everything, all physical media, feel sort of like old and outdated, and therefore super cheap and easy to get.
You say that, but then there'll be every once in a while there'll be some weird stuff. Like I remember I was listening to this in a sense behind the scenes of Mortal Kombat, the whole like from creation, the fans, the arcade experience, and so on. And they talked about there was this Mortal Kombat comic book that they gave out right when the very first game did. And so I went to go look on that on eBay. I was like, oh hell, that sounds cool. I want to get one of those. They probably put out a bunch of those. They probably can't be too expensive. I think it was like $100 used, and you're like, oh, yeah, oh yeah. Sometimes every once in a while it's not like that appears on Comixology or Kindle or anything like that. Like
No, there's a definitely like there's a very I want to create a word for it because it's how like they'll talk about like in tech they call things unicorns or which is I think an overused whimsical term, but there's something that is sort of like because it's as a comic collector you run up against things that were not hugely popular, especially me because I like a lot of old indie stuff. And it's just literally there's just such a limited print run of it that like copies of it are kind of like they're scarce. And then the scarcity is what sort of makes them like ridiculously expensive. We had in that same conversation I was talking about some because I love physical media and will never ride or die for physical media. But the like Death Race 2000, the the Blu-ray of it for whatever reason, I think because it was like it came late to the Blu-ray party and then so late in fact that it was kind of after the party was over, so they're really hard to snag now, and you'll find them on eBay for like you're saying for like $100. And then I think there's like stuff that came out kind of like just at the tail end of the whole home entertainment sort of era, and so they didn't really make a lot of them, or they made a few, they didn't sell, there's no places to buy them anymore. Best Buy doesn't have them in their racks, so like they're just rough, they're just tough to find, which makes it like very frustrating for the collector because you're like, hey look, I'm not trying to buy a Picasso, I just want this copy of The Fall.
Yeah, gosh. Oh, I know some of those things too. It's like I think about that because and it even comes when I'll collect certain things of VHSs, and I was doing the thing where somebody gave me a Betamax.
Oh man.
And I was like, it was a 007 one. He's like, well, I know you like 007. Here's a box of the VHS 007s, but check this out. There's a Betamax of A View to a Kill in here. And I was like, oh. And then I was like, in my mind, I'm like, I collect VHSs. Maybe I should start collecting some Betamaxes of just like, and I'm kind of specific. I mostly stick to like Arnold Schwarzenegger movies I collect, 007 movies. Like I got like a kind of
yeah.
And then I started looking them up, and I was like, "Oh, these Betamaxes are like $30 to $100 a piece." Yeah. Let's. I'll stick to my Laserdisc, my UMDs.
All that modern tech.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there was also a point where like I was just kind of going down the rabbit hole of like eBay, and I was like going like, what would it be like to have some 35 millimeter copies of some of my favorite movies? And it was like, most of those movies are like about 3,000 up to have just like a copy of like Commando on 35 millimeter, or something like that. You're like, oh yeah, these are definitely not cheap whatsoever. And then they got to ship to you like 12 reel.
Oh, that's the other thing. I worked at a theater, man. That stuff is so heavy. It's so heavy, and storage on it is ridiculous. Also, if you're not careful, some of it's like hugely flammable. For this next little bit, I just want to preface it by saying I got extraordinarily lucky. So in this story, remember, like I feel this is very lucky. But the place that I moved into has projector up on the ceiling and
Ooh.
like an actual like roll down screen. Like yeah, it's unreal. The person who lived here before me was a producer, so I think they had it for like, you know, screenings of stuff and whatnot. But it was like found money. Like it's just such a fantastic thing. So since we moved in, I've started watching stuff on the projector, and I gotta tell you, because I think we live in this era now where we have like, you know, you have I don't know, TVs the size of cruise ships, so you can have a home theater that is sort of big and overwhelming. I've stayed at Airbnbs where they have like it's the size of an actual wall, and you're like, oh, this is good living. But this is different. And the first movie that we watched, Criterion had released Blood Simple.
Oh, okay.
Which, yeah, right. Which I for years thought that I had seen, but I had it mixed up in my mind with Body Double. Because we were watching it, and I was like, "Wait, where's Melanie Griffith?" No, you idiot! This is an entirely different movie. So, not only is Blood Simple a movie sort of shot on celluloid, but it was an independent-ish movie. So it's not even shot on the best celluloid. So it is sort of like the graininess and the celluloidness of it is like 2 times more than other movies of the time. And seeing it projected, I can't like, without sounding woo woo about it, it's just, there's something about the shimmer of the screen and the way images shot in an analog format look when projected in the way that they're meant to be viewed. It is so magic. It's like thrilling. It just makes it makes the viewing experience like feel a little more. And there's something about like light being projected, and it's not like, I feel like ever since digital has become the way, which I'm not against. I don't want to sound like I'm a Luddite or is that a Luddite? No, whatever. I'm all for record on whatever. Like, I think purity about that is a little weird. But, when you see something from that era and then it's sort of shot in the way or projected in the way that it was sort of intended, there's an effect that they're shooting for when they're capturing everything in camera, and then that's what you're seeing. I feel like now with digital, like everything's super dark, like because they could do all this sort of color treating afterwards. Everything is sort of like pitch black and looks fine on on my laptop. Not always great, for like when you're in a movie theater or whatnot. So I don't know. I want to say, like, as far as the 35 millimeter or whatever, like if there's a way to do it that doesn't, where you don't have to like sell plasma, man, it's incredible. It's and especially if you like, if you like these things and you're not restricted to just, I only want to watch things in the last 20 years. If you like older things, one of the things I kind of thought watching Captain Blood was like, wow, I can only imagine you go into a theater, I don't know, this isn't the Depression, but like not long after you go into a theater, you're sort of like, maybe it's air conditioned, I don't know if that exists yet. You're watching the screen, it's back when theaters were sort of palaces. You're watching this stuff on there, the black and the white, again, shimmering in that way that it does across the silver screen. I guess that's why they call it that. Like, no wonder you were transported. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, no wonder, no wonder this is why this institution still exists and is sort of like one of the most revered forms of art making in our, even now, 100 or 200 years later.
Yeah, no. Those movies just carry around so much. And it is cool if you can have a projection. I remember I had a buddy back when I worked at this one gym about 12 years ago. He's like a climbing guy, and he set up this. He's like, oh, come on by the house afterwards and whatnot. He's like, I put this paint drop cloth off, and I got this projector that they gave me from a school and everything like that. And I was like, it sounds so hokey. And I was like, okay, sure, whatever. And so we go and we sit in his backyard, and it's like we start watching we just have these movie nights every a couple times a week, and it's like, oh, this actually looks legitimately good on the paint drop cloth and everything. It actually gives a very nice texture to it. And since it was like a like a projector straight from like a school. It actually they spent some good money on it, so it was a decent
Right.
one.
Yeah.
It was like a Dell one, you know, nothing ridiculous, but still like it wasn't like a cheapo. And it was like, wow, there is something really nice about having this in your backyard. And then I myself, I got a projector, you know, a handful of years ago that I always thought like, we'll do some nice outdoor movies and everything like that, you know. But the downfall is you got to kind of wait till summertime, like now, and then. The thing is it doesn't get dark till like 9, 9,
Right.
30, 10. And then you're like, a lot. I'm like, I don't even know if I want to stay up any longer than this. That's already so late as is. And, you know, there's going to be insects outside. Yeah, like.
No, during the pandemic, we, drive-ins suddenly came back on the map. And of course, they're 45 minutes outside of any town. And then nothing can start until, like in the West Coast, nothing can start until like 9 o'clock at night. So like if you're watching like the second show, like I think I saw New Mutants this way, where it was like it started at 10:30. And then like halfway through the movie, God knows they're making movies so long. You're like, holy cow, I don't know if I can stay up to find out if Mirage is actually the monster.
Yeah, that's the only thing is you get to that point where it's just like, oh, you know, once it's a little bit late there, it's like, oh, I don't know, fellas, I get kind of tired there, you know.
No, and that what you're describing, the sort of the sheet on the wall, that's like, isn't that how everybody used to watch stag movies?
Exactly, on your 8mm projector.
while the wife's away.
Smoking cigars.
Exactly. It's the cigar smoke is what kind of like helps add to the diffusion on the screen. All right, yeah. So you get like, can I do a small plug here?
Of course. And in fact, I felt like we should have did a little bit more, just a catch up, just in case anybody didn't know who old Jack was here.
Who the hell's this asshole?
Yeah, who's this guy? Just fucking shows up, kicks the other guy off.
Yeah. Well, if you're looking for the guy that framed him, fugitive style, look at the first guy who shows up on the podcast after he's gone.
Yeah.
Sorry, small plug. Oh, this isn't for me. But so same thing. Like since we got this projector, like there's this Discovery. We've been having movie nights, and for having our friends over, and like we also got a grill. Like again, very lucky. So one of the things that we have. So do you know? Wizard People, Dear Reader?
I don't believe so.
Okay, so this is the plug. So this is this guy Brad Neely, who he's kind of I kind of feel like he's unclassifiable. He's a weird. He makes like comic strippy stuff, which is sort of like it's hard to even that like. Kind of maybe in this sort of like slightly primitive style of like Fantagraphics stuff, and then he's animated some of those in that sort of like flash animation way. Baby Cakes is one of his characters who recurs. So if you want to look up like Brad Neely and Baby Cakes, I think his comic site was called Creased Comics, and they were like kind of one pagers and things like that. And then from that, I think he got gigs working for Adult Swim. China, Illinois was one of his, and then from that, after Adult Swim kind of dissolved, I think he popped up. I saw him, he various writers' rooms because he's like a kind of amazing, weird, talented guy, and it's there's always like, oh, this guy, where to slot this guy in to make him work. So he did this thing where he took Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. He just recorded his own audio track of him and this sort of character narrating the story. And then you play the audio over the movie, and it's amazing. It's fantastic. And it's not like it's not like a parody. It's not like MST3K where he's commenting on the movie, and it's not like those other things where like Honest Trailers where he's just making something else out of it. It's this sort of third thing where he is telling the story that's being told, but he's doing like a riff on it, like a different, like it's like like everyone says we're living in the worst timeline. So 7 or 8 timelines down, where the distortions are just strange and peculiar. It's the seventh timeline version of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, and it's a delight. It's funny, but it's not like a series of jokes. It's just funny in its bizarreness. So this is the perfect way to like watch something like that, because you just sort of like set the projector going and do the audio. But I want to like recommend that to everybody, no matter how you watch it. If you just look up Wizard People, Dear Reader. Wizard People, Dear Reader is the name he gave to the and you can find audio of it and just sort of like, I think the various sites host it. You can download it, and then like he gives a little instruction at the beginning of it, like sync it up now, and as soon as the street lights come on, and he has this kind of peculiar voice that he uses. It's just one of those like weird, like remember like when we were young, you would find these just bizarre artifacts that people would make, or someone would have like a weird cassette that someone had recorded of like sometimes. Just weird stuff. You just find weird stuff in the world. So it's one of those. It's like digital weird stuff. But worth hunting down. Like totally. Like it just opens you up to an entire new world.
Interesting. Yeah, that's like a fun one to kind of take a gander at some point and something like that. Kind of just even back in the day, we used to me and Dunnigan and a couple other people, like we would do like things where we would just roll the video camera over like a movie, and then we would just halfway dub it ourselves and so on. And some stuff I remember, like as a kid, you're probably thinking like this is brilliant material and whatnot. And it's probably more just to make yourselves laugh. And granted, this is still like a pre-YouTube era thing, so you don't really have anywhere to put it. You just make it and just to like show it back and forth to your friends. But
no, when I would, as a young man in school, I would spend the night at friends' houses. Like you'd go for the weekend or whatever, and we would always. It was always some form of recording. Like we would. None of my friends had like the Steven Spielberg thing of like, let's go run around with a Super 8 and make our own movies. But we would sort of like we'd have our own radio stations, and we would just do like radio bits on like we would do radio bits, and then we would like play actual songs on another boombox and record and just stuff like that, just like bonkers stuff like that. In fact, I kind of like I was going to bring this up. I was talking to a friend, and they were describing a movie, and the movie sort of like, hey, what it's like to grow up and feel very isolated, and your only friend is the internet. And I was listening to that, and I was like, grow up isolated, gotcha. And I was like, oh, let me tell you, imagine you don't even have the internet. And I was like, oh, well, what did we have? And I was like, oh, you know what? Kind of around the same time, like as soon as the internet started, I feel like this habit dropped off for me. But I remember being a kid. I don't know if this is the same for you. Most of my friends lived far away. Like they weren't neighborhood kids. So like I was on the phone, like I think from like 6th grade to probably into my 20s. I think I was on the phone for hours a day. Yeah. Like just, oh, okay, right? It's not just me.
Yeah, 100%. Like you just get on the phone with your buddies, and you would just talk all day long until like nighttime and whatnot. Pretty much blocking it so nobody else can use it.
No, also, yeah, my parents would be so mad. We also get calls, but and we would do the stupid. We would watch TV. Like we would have the TV on the same station, and we would both be watching the same show and then talking. So, and the weird thing is now I think I haven't answered a phone call in maybe 15 years. Like as soon as text messaging appeared, I was like, I'm done. I will never do this again.
That's what I mean. It's like, those long phone calls. It's like, I remember there was a period. It sounds so weird. It was like just a handful of years after school and something like that. There was this dude that I met at a concert and whatnot. He was a little bit younger than me. And like the first thing is when I gave him his number, he called. He's like, hey, what you doing? Like just doing that. Like, oh, there's like that age range. You're in that time period where you got about 3 hours to kill right now.
That is the thing. I think it's a lot of time with nothing to do in it. So why not just hang out with somebody? But here's my thesis. Is podcasting, like, is this that is this what are we doing? We're sitting, we're talking, like the technology is different. We're not, I'm not talking into a receiver, but we're like, because again, not to reveal how the sausage gets made, but you while describing because I was like, do we have to, do we do a scene by scene, and then like a recap? Is this going to be a recap? And you're like, no, I just want it to be a conversation. And I was like, oh no, of course, that's what that's what these are. And I can't remember if this was when the camera was rolling or not, but we were like, save it for the podcast, save it for the podcast. Because like when you do this, you have to like don't because you don't want to spoil it, or you don't have to like say the same story twice. So like there is this way in which like this is the conversation, like most of the people you're talking to, they're your friends. So like this is kind of like how you get with your friends and catch up and like talk about the stuff that you like, oh, did you see, blah blah blah. So it's kind of like, it's like, oh, this is podcasting the new sitting around talking on the phone until 1 a.m.
Yeah, you know what? I think you're kind of right, because that's generally the number one way that I sort of interact with people anymore is like through a podcast experience, and just even like, movie wise, I always felt like the way I've always looked at even on Old Man Orange, it's just like, whenever you do a movie review, it's almost like the equivalent of like, you went and saw this movie in the cinema, and then you and your buddies afterwards stood around, talked at high volumes outside the theater, watched the theater close, watched the guy go like, Jesus Christ, people, go home. As he shuffles off to his beater car, that's always what I sort of think about it, like, and I guess speaking of movies, we could say, well, if you've been waiting around this long to go, God damn it, when are they going to talk that vintage cinema review that he keeps blabbing on about? We're talking about, good old
look at that.
Blood. Errol Flynn's first American movie of 1935, and I got the old Warner Brothers set right there with all the fun-filledness of it. It makes it feel like it's in sepia tone, but the movie's not. But
no. Hey, what are the special features on that?
It's got a real solid half-an-hour documentary on there that goes through the making of, Errol Flynn coming to the U.S., his kind of first thing there. This is Olivia de Havilland's one of her first big movies. It's got a great one on it. And these Warner Brothers ones, they did a really good job, because they have this other part, which is really cool, where on all the old school Warner Brothers movies, they have it called Warner Night at the Movies. And so what it is Leonard Maltin comes on first and goes, hey, everybody, let me tell you about the old days, And he introduces it, and then they play it out like you were in the cinema in 1935. So it's got like a newsreel, a short, a cartoon. Like in a sense, speaking of projectors and all that kind of stuff, this would be the hip, probably it'd be more one of those ones. I know I would enjoy this. Everybody else might look at me kind of confused, but if you had a party and everybody came over and you did the Warner Night at the Movies, so you can make great grandpappy happy. Because everybody else is gonna be like, Jesus, what's going on here? Like, why are we watching? I remember there was one of them. I didn't rewatch this one for this showing, but there was one that I remember it was one of the Errol Flynn ones, and it was like 1937, the Great Flood of Reno, Nevada. I'm like, hey, well, there we go. It's right next door. And how devastating it was. Destruction had everywhere. And they had all this cool old school footage, which, don't get me wrong, is really neat. Or like there was another Errol Flynn one that had the short had Ronald Reagan in it. And I was like, oh my gosh. So like it's a 6-minute short where like, before Ronnie Reagan's anybody yet.
What is the president doing in this Western? Hold on. Do you have Alamo Cinema Draft Houses up in your neck of the woods?
No, sadly, the close one's San Francisco. That's a
bummer, because they do that thing that you're talking about. Well, not exactly. They do like for when you sort of file in. So they have it where you can order food. Food a hit and miss on like actually. Once I got like, you're sitting in these like Easy Boy recliners, and I got a hamburger, and of course it spilled like all the juice, and I was like, you know what? Don't eat
right at the beginning of the movie too. To see that soggy.
Yeah, no, I was like, but you know what? Great cheese sticks. It's a great place to get a cheese stick, get a finger
Yeah.
food. Well, you know what? You're all adults. You don't need to be telling how to live your life. Also, not the point. The point is they do these. They want you to arrive early in order so that like it's not disruptive to the movie. So they have these reels that they put together before the movie that are thematically linked. So like I think when I saw Gremlins, they had like everything from commercials for the toys from like 1982 or whatever to stories about like World War II bombers getting falling apart and like, oh, we think it's these little gremlins, like so they'll just tie in a bunch of stuff, music videos that might kind of like link in or not, and they're so it's that thing of like some guy out there has this sort of like head full of useless trivia, and his job is to cut these reels together, and like nothing makes him happier. I shouldn't say guy, it could be a girl, than just going through all the like going through YouTube, calling all this information, and then putting these reels together. Like it's the perfect job for the perfect person, because the thing you feel is how lovingly curated it is. Like this is a person who just truly gets it and truly loves all the little Easter eggs that they're able to find. It's better than the movie 9 times out of 10.
Yeah. That sounds like the perfect gig for myself. I would love to do that kind of stuff.
Oh my god, I know, right?
Oh man, my buddy on Via VHS podcast, he used to work at Alamo Draft House in North Carolina for a good while. So.
Oh wow.
So he got it, you'd be able to take all the rentals home if you need to and so on. You get the extra experiences when like, in North Carolina, they'd have a lot of like showings where they'd bring in special guests for, talks afterwards and so on.
Oh, that's cool.
So I was like, oh, that's pretty sweet. But yeah, the closest one for me is San Francisco, and I've sadly never been to it.
That's it. Well, you know what? I think it's doing
because it wasn't
like,
there when I lived in San Francisco. It didn't exist yet. It was like it came, of course, like later in life.
No, I think they're doing. It seems like they're doing well. It seems like they're opening up in more places. So, like, fingers crossed. I think it'll very soon. California, great place to put up movie theaters.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of an industry town.
Our few really golden movie theaters. There's only so many of them left anymore, and
So Captain Blood. So did you watch the making of for this one? Because I have some questions actually.
Yeah, I actually was when I was eating dinner and I was telling you I was finishing it up. I was literally watching it on my portable DVD player. I was like, I only got so much time. I'm gonna get everything done at once. I'm gonna sit here, watch special features of Errol Flynn, eat my steak like it's 1935, and get ready to talk to Jack.
So steak sauce on that, or because isn't that like that's the vintage way to do it? Is that weird? Like, is it A1 ketchupy steak sauce?
I don't think I've ever had A1 in my entire life. I've always seen it there, like at a restaurant, and I would always think of like the artificial intelligence movie, like A1. And so,
It's disgusting. I don't mind saying, and sorry if I just lost you a sponsor, but I think the thing is, I think truly cuts of meat back. That you know what, this is going to be a theme in this episode where I have prejudices, I suppose, about the past, which get kind of completely, I think, blown out of the water. But I imagine the cuts of meats were so bad, you're like, oh, the only way to eat this is like with, like, do you remember Salisbury steak?
Yep. Yeah, but you don't see that anymore. I don't know what.
No, because like they don't. Child abuse isn't a thing for these new kids. No, it was. I think it was like, imagine, if you will, listeners, a ground meat, ground chuck, like it made into a steak. It was like a steak made of hamburger.
It was literally Frankenstein together.
Burned to like shoe leather. So either way, I think meat used to be not as like now. Like I think you can go to like just go to your grocery store, get a cut of meat. It's going to be fucking fantastic. But I think back in the day, maybe it wasn't. But I could be entirely wrong. I could be, well, actually, the weird thing is meats were so much better in the 50s because they didn't have, irradiated beans in them or whatever. But
really, what I always sum it up. It's World War II is when the processed food starts to really start coming hard because you need to feed everybody. So the processed food really comes around right around that era. So in 1935, give or take where you are in the U.S., if you got some money, like let's be honest, Errol Flynn and all the guys at Warner Brothers who are doing pretty well in the bank account department, they're probably eating pretty decent cuts of meat.
Oh yeah. No,
You know what I mean?
Flynn isn't using
They
A1.
definitely don't got some Salisbury steak.
I think so. I did a little Wikipedia research, so prepare to be amazed. I think what you had already said, this I did not know is like Errol. If it's not his first movie, it's his first sort of like leading role.
It's his first American movie. He has one movie in England beforehand, and then he has a couple bit parts or whatever in the U.S. So this is technically his first real big movie, but there is one prior, but it's English, so it doesn't count as much.
Right. I gotta say, I think he's one or two shots in, and by the way, they have a kind of heavy hand with this throughout the whole movie, but those opening shots are just framed. They've got these just beautiful Dutch angles when they're sort of like coming into Dr. Blood's office. They're really like it's not just that the camera is set in this interesting way. Is it the set that they're making? Because the stuff feels very constructed. It's just arranged in this like slightly extreme, but visually very, very compelling. Like the minute you start watching it, you're like, wow, this is there. Like again, I'm thinking like, oh, it's a very, they're trying to do 100 of these a day. It's very, I saw Babylon. It's a, it's a primitive process at this point. But then you look at this, you're like, no, this is a little more artfully considered than I think a lot of filmmaking today is, like just as far as like there's these like, there's a later when they're in Tortuga, I think there's a tracking shot, goes under a bridge, and you can't quite tell if the bridge is the bridge real or is the bridge sort of like constructed and just placed in front of the back? I don't know. It is beautifully, I don't know if that's art direction or cinematography, but just beautifully conceived. What did you think?
Well, here's the thing. This is why I feel like the 30s is when everything started to really come together in cinema.
Okay, right.
Like, they spent from the 1890s all the way up, you went through the silent era and everything like that, and that was where like all the testing ground was and so on. But by the time the 30s came around, I felt like a lot of these guys, like they kind of knew how to do all the tips and tricks.
Yeah.
They knew all the secrets of kind of building these. They were shooting them on, in the Warner Brothers lot, so they had full control over lighting and construction and design. And so much stuff. That's the thing is, I think sometimes people will think like these movies, like, oh, it's gonna be a really old movie. It's gonna feel kind of hokey, and it's like, no, did you watch these old pirate movies? And they will blow like any of these modern movies like out of the water, literally, by like how well they're put together. They're action packed, and just the mix match of cool models with mix of like rear projection, and all like the kind of building tactics that they kind of have, the depth perception and so on. There's just a lot of cool stuff going on here. And I feel like that's just this kind of era where the Hays Code has just barely come in, so it's still they don't have it where it's like under your thumb kind of point yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I think on these period pieces, they even said this in the special features when I was watching it, but they said like the period pieces sort of slid a little bit more underneath the Hays Code. It's like, oh well, it's ye old 1600s. You know what I mean? It was a different time period. You know what I mean? You could get away with it. So these ones could kind of be in almost like not they're historical, but they almost like were looked upon as it's in a fantasy realm of ye old days. It's not 1930s. We got to make this stuff feel like serious and bleak because we just had the Great Depression.
Right. So that answers another question. There are shots that are kind of well, you know what? Before we get to how it got made, just to go back to Errol Flynn. Wow, this guy is a movie star. Like,
yeah, so
from
charming.
The first, and then he does this thing throughout the movie. I've only seen a few Errol Flynn movies, so I can't say that I know his catalog very well. And I think of him, I think like Robin Hood more, a little more physical, like more of a physical swashbuckling actor. And I think this performance is kind of almost all through the face. Like he is smiling, this sort of like George Clooney, I'm going to charm you smile, even through the worst of his experiences, like when they're like Captain Blood, I'm sorry, you are now a slave. Yeah, got that grand. Oh, well, this turned out a little worse than I expected. And it's not the only thing I can think of, and I hate to come back to this over and over again. I feel like when I saw Pretty Woman, Julia Roberts is like a supernova. You know what I mean? Like the whatever it was that she had, that movie star. It's not just, obviously she's a beautiful woman, but she's not just a beautiful woman. And, obviously she's a great actress, but she's not just a great actress. It's just like, it's this element X that is just sort of like, it's just somebody who's so magnetic. You don't want to take your eyes off them. You don't want to, like 2 hours is not enough time to spend with this person. And like, obviously almost all movie stars have that, but then you get these like super movie stars who just like, it's like you get such a heavy dose of it. And I thought, like, after I saw Pretty Woman, I was like, holy cow, that is just, the charisma just comes out of her into you in the movie theater. And not just you, everyone, like everybody is sort of like, wow, that's something. And like, he's got that, like, it's just something that comes out of him. And like, Errol Flynn is a beautiful man. Like, there's like, he's beautiful to look at, and he's got this sort of like, he has this charm, but there's this other quality where he's just, and he's paired up with all these other actors, not all of them. I mean, I think he's the leading man, so there aren't any like rivals as far as his good looks. A lot of the people are generally older men, and but every scene he's in, there's one where I think where he's in court, or maybe it's a big scene with a bunch of other men, and the camera's just panning, and before you even land on him, you see him. You know what I mean? Like, he just sort of glows. But it's that thing. It's like, no wonder this guy had this career. Like, of course he would. He's got that thing. But what did you think?
Oh yeah, most definitely. Because it's one of those ones, like, it was like 15 years ago or so, give or take. I got really into Errol Flynn. I was kind of watching Robin Hood over, and I was like, I want to check out the rest of his movies. So I started buying those like Warner Brothers box sets of Errol Flynn. And then I got his autobiography, and holy crap, was his like it made everybody else's autobiography just seem so uninteresting. And the funny thing about Errol Flynn's is that the most boring part of his life is when he's in movies. It's like one of those ones, like, his life is already a high-filled, swashbuckling adventure, globe-trotting, hilarious stories. Like, I mean, just the whole way through. And it's like, and it runs under like 400 pages. So like, when I see people like who got those autobiographies for 800 pages, you're like, let's be honest, your life ain't that interesting. I know you think you need 800 pages, but Errol Flynn had 367 or something like that. And I know some people, I saw somewhere that some people said that, like, oh, well, he probably embellished a little bit. I don't even care if he embellished a little bit. Whatever, the book reads amazing, and if that's the case, I mean, like everybody, I think, embellishes their own life a little bit more. You turn it to 11. You know what I mean? Like,
no, when you're Errol Flynn, you get to embellish your life because you're Errol Flynn. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I still think that, like, he's probably still talking his real stories, but I mean, he went from like having money to having nothing. He's born in Tasmania. He becomes sort of almost like a pirate himself. He gets a gold mine, so he gets a bunch of guys to go out and mine it with him. There was no gold there. It was during that Australian gold rush. It was just another wasted place. But during the part, he's even got like a little short round boy who's carrying his bags, just like Indiana Jones has. Except for this short round guy gets attacked by natives, speared to death, and eaten by an alligator, never to be seen again. Like, wow. It's just, like, I mean, you're going through this stuff, and you're like, oh my God, this is really ridiculous adventure stuff. And he hasn't even got to the movies yet. You know what I mean? He gets trapped in World War II, like the proto era, where it's just like the Chinese-Japanese section. And because Australia's tied to England, yada, 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 him and this American dude sign up. And he's like, there'll be great glory. We'll go on. There'll be fantastic adventures, all kinds of swashbuckliness. And then he's like, and then there'll be like rape, plunder, and everything else. And he's like, and then Errol Flynn stops with us. He's like, my American friend really liked the rape part. And so they learned that it wasn't really all that glorious. They were just digging ditches for the Chinese for 3 weeks straight. And they're like, we got to get out of here. we're gonna forge some papers, sign ourselves out, and we are traveling to India and going up to England. You know what I mean? Forget about this. So yeah, it's just like there's so much stuff there, and then you get to his movies, and he's got these amazing, amazing pirate movies. Like the 1930s is filled, and even 40s too, with such good pirate films. It's just like a lost generation because past that point, yeah, you trickle in a pirate movie here and there, but they're so rare, especially even nowadays. I mean, I would have thought that Pirates of the Caribbean would have been the thing that brought pirate movies back, but ironically, nobody else made a pirate movie. It was like they did that thing, and it was just like, yep, and I guess we're not going to compete with the Mouse and Johnny Depp.
No, I agree. I kind of there are two things I do not understand why there aren't more pirate movies being one of them, because I feel like it's right at the edge, like sword and sorcery, depending on your whimsy, like how much whimsy you like in a story, is sort of like whether a story is like a historical, a medieval story, a la the Green Knight, or if it's, Conan. And I think pirates are sort of that, like, that one step beyond the sort of like the prosaic and the mundane, because like they're historical, but there's this element of whimsy in them that kind of, like a pirate is almost an enchanted character. In fact, there's a scene late in this movie where, I guess we can spoil it. It's been 90 years.
We're going on. We're getting close to it. Yeah. It'll be its 90th anniversary next year. That's weird to think.
All right. So I won't say who. I won't fully spoil. But Captain Blood falls in love, and the pirates are like, "This is not our life. This isn't what we do. We don't fall in love. We don't, give up this lifestyle for a dame." And it's a little bit like the Lost Boys with Peter Pan, where they're like, "Hey, you can't be one of us if you want these things. Like ours is a life, like of adventure on the high seas, and what you want is this other thing that is not compatible with it." And so, like, there is a way. Not obviously, they're like realistic depictions of pirates. There's a lot of scurvy, but the pirate of lore, which is Pirates of the Caribbean, is kind of like it's a quasi fantasy character, and depending on how much you want to like push on the gas on that, like I think like with the success of Game of Thrones, I feel like, well, why wouldn't there be? Like the obvious next jump is like, well, pirates. So I agree with it. And then also, like, why aren't there more H.P. Lovecraft movies? I don't understand. This feels like it's such a no-brainer. Like, yeah. Like I feel like everybody in the culture knows Cthulhu, but why aren't there like Cthulhu movies? But I guess it's white space. Somebody can come fill it in soon.
I feel like they did that Batman one not too long ago. It was an animated one, but it was Batman meets Cthulhu.
Is that real?
That is real. It's an anime.
How do I not know this? This is crazy. Really? Batman meets Cthulhu? Who wins?
I thought it was pretty good. Batman, of course. Yeah. It's like, he's like, yeah, whose name's in the title? Batman. Yeah, that's what I fucking thought. But I thought it was actually pretty good. I just kind of forgot about it until you just mentioned it. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot. That came out it was about 2 years ago or something like that.
Oh wait, you know what? I completely drawing a blank. I did see that. It's a Batman. It's a Mignola. Yes. Sorry. Yeah. That was great. It was fantastic. It was. It's my thing with these movies. Sorry, I don't mean to be a hater, but the animation. I just wish the animation was just 2 ticks better. Like
you just so it's one of those ones. It's like sometimes I kind of feel like I wish that a little bit less computer, more people spending 12 hours a day drawing.
yes, slave mines is basically.
Speaking of Captain Blood and slaves, I'm like, if they were all out there animating.
Okay, all right. Errol Flynn, total movie star, and I have a theory about this movie. I'm going to be talking out of my ass, so feel free to step in and correct me. It feels like this movie feels like you were talking about silent movies a minute ago. This feels transitional, because there are these sort of these kind of plot dump title cards that come up, that feel silent movie-ish to me. Like not they don't feel like a silent movie because it's it's not dialogue or anything, but it does feel like, oh, as an audience you're trained to pause and read. So like because there was one title card with a lot of exposition. It felt very much like the opening crawl to Star Wars, and it went on a bit. I think it went through 3 cards, and I was like, this is a lot to expect from the attention span of people in 2024. But then I was like, oh no, of course people are used to this. In fact, this is probably so much less reading than if you were in a silent movie. So, but I was like, oh, this stuff still exists. Like these sort of like that you wouldn't solve the problem of telling the story in a story. You would just sort of like, oh, just post a title card and it'll give the info dump that we need. And so that kind of feels like, oh, it's a little vestigial from silent movies, but the movie itself feels kind of modern because like you were saying, I don't know that this is true, but my sense is some of it's shot on set, some of it's shot on location, some of it uses miniatures. Like it feels like a lot of sophisticated techniques, especially around like, let's broadly call special effects, that aren't necessarily present in the early stage. So it feels like, oh, you can kind of see a direct line from this to like Jim Cameron movies, as far as like, oh, we're going to use all of these tools to tell, to visually storytell. So it feels like, oh, kind of historically it's planted in that place. Like it's between both. It's between, it's from the silent we don't quite have as much of a context for anymore. And then modern filmmaking. And then I think Errol Flynn is a lot of these guys, like the rest of the cast, who by and large are delights. They feel like, because a lot of them are older. Everybody's older. Like the median age is like 40.
Everybody's older, but they're probably all like 30 years old in the movie. It's like one of those ones you probably look it up and go like, that's a young man right there. He sure doesn't look like it. Yeah.
So a lot of the older actors, they feel to me like, oh, these are people who started out on stage, like because like theater work is probably where most like film actors came from. These people have a very stage-oriented presence. I think the first judge who condemns Captain Blood to a life of slavery, who is like, I think one of the, like, there's a lot of great performances, is one of the sort of like, for a very small role, has kind of a magnetic performance that's just like malevolence that radiates off of. He's also dying, so it's like malevolence and I'm not going to be around much longer. But you feel like, oh, this is a theater actor, and he's performing, for the back row. And Errol Flynn isn't. Like Errol Flynn is doing a lot with like just this much of his face, and then like B, really those eyes. Like he's winning and he's engaging. There's a lot of swashbuckling fights later, or not a lot. There's a few, but I don't think he's the sort of like, he doesn't come swinging, from the sails or whatever. Like you're kind of like the Errol Flynn you're used to thinking. Like he really he wins several scenes through oratory. He gives speeches, and then he just charms the dickens off of just about everybody. He really only has, I think, just the one duel, which is, even as far as like an Errol Flynn movie, I think not, like it's on a beach, so it's fantastic, and you can just tell.
Laguna Beach too.
Is that where it was? I was like, I know this isn't the Caribbean. I was like, this feels Laguna-ish, but no, I feel like he's a modern actor. He's not a guy who's necessarily, and I'm not saying I don't know his backstory if he is theater trained or not, but this is a guy who knows how to work for the camera, which is sort of small, because like all these performances are so big. Even like later, in a kind of too small role, I think Basil Rathbone, the guy who was Sherlock Holmes, pops up, and he's fantastic. They have a good. I wish the rivalry had been throughout more of the movie, so there was a better payoff when they have that fight. Oh, spoilers! Even Rathbone, who is also a fantastic actor, he does have this theatricality to him, which is a little bit of artifice, which works on stage. And I think movies it's like the really great actors do so little, and then somehow through the magic of movies, that little is the perfect amount. And I feel like he's the guy. of all the actors in this film who has really got that. You know, like he feels like he's a modern actor. Like you could watch a movie with Errol Flynn from this movie today, and it's not a weird like this feels transported from another time. It would feel completely natural. Like he's using an affect. Also, so did Orlando Bloom, because of the because that's what the period requires. But apart from that, he's just a natural actor. He's fantastic. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And I was even thinking that in this kind of rewatch, and then of kind of almost just like the various actors in there, because you look at some guys, you go, God, that guy's been probably born in like 1870. So that means he's seen it all. He went from stage with the vaudeville. He did Nickelodeons. He did silent movies, and he still made it in the talkies. Like the weird thing to think about is it was only like 7 years ago from Captain Blood that like the first talkie started to appear. You know what I mean? Like it still is a very, very new format to have sound. I mean, even in the early 30s, there is people still making silent movies. So they're like, well, we're not changing the technology yet. These talkie things will be a fad. Lo and behold, it didn't last so long. But
well, I will say, just on that note, I did notice there's a soundtrack, and I think it's deployed. During the love scenes, you've got the sort of melodramatic swell of music, and then during the adventure scenes, there's the sort of like, the fight music. But there's a lot of scenes where there's nothing, and that is interesting because I feel like I would say an innovation, particularly of the last. Not an innovation. Obviously, movies have been using music, but I think. Like when I saw the Royal Tannenbaums, and there are these big music cues that are, it's not just sort of like a powerful music behind the movie. It is sort of woven into what the movie is supposed to be. Like it's like Goodbye Ruby Tuesday is giving you a character beat as much as it's putting music behind a scene. And I feel like since then, like I think that's David O. Russell, there's a lot of guys who use the music in this sort of like really like the music makes the scene. In fact, I think half of like what's going on in Netflix now is like it's just amazing. Like if you have a so-so scene, the right song in the right spot could kind of like bring it all together. So like, and that none of that is sort of working. That hasn't been worked out yet. And so I think as a modern audience, you're not used to literally crickets behind the dialogue being spoken. And that's interesting because, it gives these, like, I think particularly whenever there's a scene with a bunch of people, there's a little murmur, but then when two people are in a heated debate, then suddenly like it gets very quiet. It's like they're the only two people in the room. I don't know. It's interesting. Do you have anything to say on that?
Oh, no, I was just going to say this kind of that music is almost in that has that kind of operatic kind of punch to it too.
Yeah.
It hits kind of real hard, but then it gets, dramatic and so on and, just the right ones. It actually has a really good score throughout the whole thing. But I think the music was sort of the first thing that was real dialed in movies before, because obviously music was what carried all those 1920s movies really hard,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, that's that was another thing. As I thought, is this a thing where you would hear it live? Because I think the opening swells. I can't remember. There's just some theme where I was like, wow, this should be something.
No, by this point, you wouldn't hear them live. That was kind of
too bad.
A 1910s and 20s things, because those guys got all pissy once like the talkies came by and they had lost all their jobs and so on like that. They're like, damn AI coming in, taking our jobs. Yeah, it was one of those moments.
Been happening for hundreds of years.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's always that, or like, yeah, there's always some musician who's just like, bitching because they had a great gig for a decade, and then like they assumed it was going to last until death. But,
yeah, you know what? Rule of thumb: no gig is going to last longer than 10 years. If it does, you're lucky.
If you get a solid decade of it, awesome. But always plan for what's going to be next.
I have a question for you, which is just to I am the age that when I was a young man, television, like if you say you have a sick day and you stay home from school,
Mm-hmm.
TV would be half black and white. Like during the day, it
Yep.
would be a lot of black and white. Perry Mason, the game shows, of course, which would be in color. But like, still, TV was divided into like half of the stuff was syndicated stuff that was old enough to be um, still in black and white, and then other stuff was in color. Like modern stuff was in color. So there was a natural instinct I had as a young person to, if it was black and white, this is not for you. Skip to the next channel. And then I remember maybe in my teens is when Ted Turner came around and started colorizing old movies, which was controversial. I don't know if it still is, because people were like, hey, this is not the original artist's intention, and how dare you? And then other people would sort of like, you know what, if someone sees a black and white movie, they automatically kind of dismiss it, and if they see a color movie, maybe they'll sit and watch it. So it's a chance to maybe get these movies in front of audiences on the sly. And I kind of think whether that works or not is not, I'm not here to litigate that, but I do think that I grew up with a bit of a prejudice against older films. And then when I would try to engage with them, when I would oh man, just you start like, I used to, there's a library, our library had VHS tapes, and you could check them out for free. And so like obviously the library that they had was pretty small, and mostly it's a library, so it's going to be targeted towards older an older audience. Mm-hmm. So a lot of those movies were older movies, and I would like, oh well, maybe I should, this is how you watch Citizen Kane, this is how you kind of fill in the gaps on your film history. And I would struggle a little bit to there's something about like when you watch a modern movie, this is a tangent, I think like when I was a kid, crying in movies, you'd see like a person would like get choked up, and like a single tear would roll down the cheek, and you felt authentic, and the camera's on them, and you really feel the emotion. And then somewhere around in my teens or 20s, people would, you'd see snot. You'd be crying so hard that like snot would, and you'd be like, wow, that's visceral. That's what crying really is. And so like the goal of, I think, filmmaking is like, more authenticity, make the world more like the world And so like, parallel to this, like I feel like, I don't know if you clock this, but I feel like in my 20s, every movie had a scene where a person was peeing, and it was just this little move of like, hey, look how real this is. We're showing you a person like standing in front of a urinal peeing. And the number of movies in which I was like, we don't really need to spend 30 seconds here listening to this this foley. But again, it's that, and I think like also like the way people would speak dialogue, instead of like being, dialogue would have these weird pauses, and people accidentally talking over each other, to kind of simulate what, so there's this strive for realism. So when you're watching a modern movie, it kind of, like I think young people who watch movies now, when they see somebody zoned out on their phone, you're like, oh, this feels real. This is not my bit. To borrow a bit, like a person was complaining about how texting, when they do the little text bubble appears and the person types in, hey, thinking about getting something for dinner, they're enraged. I guess the Gen Zers are enraged that like texting never looks like this. If you want to do a real texting scene, A, you have to include the typos, and then B, you have to like send, and then you wait a minute and a half for the reply to come. But so that's what my point is, like slowly the world you live in is reflected by the movies that you watch, and so it's more comfortable to you because you recognize it. And so going back to older movies, like I would think a young person now watching Star Wars would be like, what is the first ones? So the same thing. So this is such a long preamble to say, like, so you love these movies, you love this period of time. Mm-hmm. What do you do to set your head around, or to turn your head around to like, how do you watch a movie from like 90 years ago?
Well, I'll say this, my entire life, ever since I was a little kid, I've always been a romanticist, no matter what. Okay. Like I've been hard into history, hard, and I really like old things so much so that it might even be a little bit mentally like not good sometimes, because there's periods where you go, man, if I was just way back in the day, there's so much stuff that would be cool, but then you don't really realize that you actually have a lot of great stuff too. It's almost like that. I don't know if you ever saw that Woody Allen movie Midnight in Paris, but
Yeah.
like that movie, I love that movie, and it's like that movie to me is just like, my gosh, I relate 100% to the Woody Allen character played by Owen Wilson in that one.
Yeah.
Where it's just like I get it, like, but that'd be me with like movies and things like that. And when I was growing up too, it's like, you do that thing, which this is like, I've talked about this before on podcasts, is that, back in a lot of times our day, pretty much before modern day TV of now, I guess the last 20 years, is that they mix matched all sorts of stuff on TV. So like when you watch something, you weren't just watching things from like the 80s, the 90s, then the 2000s and so on. You literally got a mixture of like, here's something from the 30s, here's something from the 60s, here's something from the 50s. Here, even like cartoon shows. It's like, cartoons, you were literally watching a Popeye one followed up by a Super Friends one. Then it would jump back to like Herculoids. And it all sort of intermingled together, where I think kids nowadays, and, anybody who's watching just kind of like on Netflix, you pretty much, you don't see anything that's made like more than about 10 years ago. Like it really is, curated to that, / you have so much choices as is that you don't have time for it, and you don't have the TV dictating it, because you know how it is when you were like back in the day as a kid, you would watch certain shows even if you hated it, but you're like, well, that's the next hour block. I'm not leaving this couch. I don't like this show, but I'm going to watch it like I do every night, because it just is it's that in between time period. But also in that, I think by doing stuff like that, you can kind of get into a lot more different genres, different ages, different so on. But as I said, I really do like a lot of old stuff. I mean, I even read a lot of old like 1800s books and so on like that I can find some kind of interesting things into and so on like that. Most people go, what? You read a workout book from 1895? I'm like, yeah, the Eugene Sanders stuff. It's like, it's golden stuff in here. Like, he's telling you like the truth. Like he had it dialed in, and but yeah, just older movies. Like once I kind of got really into the 30s, especially that one, because like I'll say that like the 40s is still solid. The 50s is kind of like an okay section. There's great movies in there. I'm not saying that there's not, but it is kind of it's the safe zone post World War II era for sure. Once you get to like the 60s on up, it kind of comes back together again. But like man, just like the 30s, just. I think it's just one of those ones, like I said kind of earlier, I think they really had filmmaking dialed in at about this point. It's like they kind of figured out what worked, what didn't. They had all the equipment. They figured out all the tips and tricks. They had all the old school special effects, the optical effects. A lot of these things that even like, are still used today, like this is where they're all coming together. And they were working off, they had all kinds of great material from, books for the last 1,000 years that you could pull from. So it was still kind of fresh and new. And even back then, you still would see, I know people complain about movies being remade a bunch. I'm like, well, they used to do that all the time back then, too. Like,
no, this is the second Captain Blood, right?
Yes, I think there's a silent one. If I'm not mistaken, there's one there, and it's like Robin Hood. I mean, it's like that one's made multiple times. You have like, you have the Douglas Fairbanks one, which is an amazing silent movie. Like, holy crap! But then like, less than like maybe 15 years, if that later, then you have the Errol Flynn one, which is another amazing one. But like the technology changes radically, because you go from a silent black and white movie where it's not locked into 24 frames to here is not only like a masterpiece, colored film, we have talkie, like we have all this technology just like literally came in like a decade. And so just as I said, like myself getting into it, like I've just always been into old stuff. As I grew up, I liked older music, you know what I mean? I think because I listened to the same thing my parents did, so I listened to a lot of like 50s, 60s, and 70s music, and it's just kind of like the same with movies. I pretty much just watched the same things my parents did too, so if they liked older stuff, I liked that, and so on. And so I just kind of got into a lot of this stuff. And then I went older. Like, so I would go, like, because I know there's some people, like, I'll talk to certain people's, like, parents and so on like them. They're like, I don't watch movies from, like, the 40s and stuff. The acting's all weird in it and so on. It's like, oh, okay. I don't know. I just feel like, it's just the time. That's just kind of how it is. But it's still, in my opinion, it works. Like, I think, like, when I watch Captain Blood, it's, other than the fact it's in black and white, and, you were saying earlier about the recoloring, this would be an interesting one to see, the recolored one, because I like the recolored. I like both black and white and recolored, because it just gives a completely different vibe that, and you'll see things that you might normally not catch in the black and white version and so on.
I'm glad you say that, because there were moments. I think the duel on the beach. First of all, I just know that those beautiful Caribbean blues would have been incredible, and the way I pictured the fight on the beach, it's magic hour. You know what I mean? Like everything has kind of a beautiful amber haze over it, and then uh, the fight is that lighting plus the blue of the water. I just think this would have been a gorgeous movie. I mean, I think anything set on a beach, anything set on a beach, if it isn't in color, you've really robbed yourself of like a real natural resource. So that is. You go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and we're just moments away from glorious Technicolor,
Right?
when like they use that high end film, and like because that's the thing is like you'll see colored movies from like the 30s and like the 40s, and they look like marvelous, and they hold up so well today. Where you get movies like in the 60s they were in color, and because they cheapened out on the film, they didn't buy the good stuff. They have that real faded away look.
Yeah.
Because until they get digitized, that's where they get left off at.
Well, there's a part of me that thinks I like that effect. Like, it's something I tried. Like, I set up a bunch of filters on my work for the I wanted the book that I was working on to have a 70s feel. Like, I wanted I just wanted to like the character wore like a jacket, like a kind of a maroon Naugahyde jacket. I wanted if for the style of the book, the styling of the book to have that look. But I also wanted, so I set up this filter that sort of desaturated everything, took everything sort of like a step down in saturation, and then shifted it just a little bit to the red, so that it not red, but like so warm. So that everything kind of had like a little bit, like it just looked like a Polaroid, like a Polaroid photo from 1974 or whatever. And this was there's a way in which I have been super canny in my comic work, because this was right when like bright acid pink and green covers started like everybody had like, it was either this high screaming pink magenta or that really high cyan blue was like and I was like, oh, it's great to be completely out of step with everybody else in the industry right now. but I also feel like when you think of movies from the 70s, what you think of, I think, is sort of like, oh, there's a kind of, it is a desaturated, like it's a little grungier, like, New York doesn't look like a metropolis. It looks like a city on the edge of collapse. There's a distrust of our, like, it's anti-nationalist corporations. Everyone is trying to like get the man, like everyone has their thumb on your back. So I feel like that, the look of it, the gritty kind of like cheap and not well preserved look matches the tone. And when you think about like you were saying in the 50s and 60s, like when I think of like the Wizard of Oz and that sort of like, it's a different time. It is like the brightness of that kind of matches, like it feels like, oh, that also matches the theme. The theme is, is sort of like artificially saccharine, to the point of everything being a little like in high vis. So I like that. And that I recently did a rewatch on Twin Peaks, and in the new season that had come out a few years ago, shot on digital. And so like having watched it shot on, a TV show shot for TV, and then watching this like super high crisp, like high def clean, a little cold. I feel like it kind of captured this time too, where like, like everything is in better definition than you might want, like there is no soft filter making everything a little more palatable. It's going to be like high def whether you want it or not. And so like, I feel like the new sort of very cold, crisp, look of like high def video digital is, it does feel like, it feels modern. Like it feels like, modern in the way that the modern world kind of feels.
Yeah, it's not like it's almost as smooth as old celluloid kind of film is and so on. And even just, kind of going off the way that, the interesting thing also in Captain Blood is that the way that it tonally changes too, because right beforehand you have the Great Depression going on. So they had a little bit more darker movies at that time period, not as much as maybe other stuff, but still movies that be kind of surprisingly where it's like, oh, things aren't always as good as you think they are. And this was almost sort of a renaissance towards about this point where like the swashbuckling and the fun sort of came back. Fun came back until World War II kind of happened again. And then but like at this time period, it was like, there was definitely like almost like a resurgence, kind of no different than like when Star Wars came out in the 70s, because that sort of did that same thing too, because you had all these dark, depressing movies and so on. Don't get me wrong, I love all that. I love all the variations of film. But then you get Star Wars, and all of a sudden it's like here's in a sense like almost an old school studio style movie, like it is like the 1940s again, and it shifts its way into like the 80s and so on like that. But Captain Blood was kind of like one of those ones where like, we're going to give a fun-filled adventure, I mean, it's granted, it's like one of those ones, like, even though I know we're kind of far into the podcast, but just if anybody was kind of curious, like, what the hell is this story even about? I know it's pirates. But like, the real simple thing of it is these guys in England, and this was a common thing back then, too. Captain Blood's a doctor, Peter Blood, and whatnot like that, and he's literally helping out a wounded guy who's like a traitor. And because he's doing this, because he's, taking that Hippocratic oath of, he gets thrown into a slave ship, which is very common in these times. People kind of forget about this, but like just as many, they were putting slaves of their own people, like left and right. That was a very common thing to send down to like the Caribbeans. Yeah. And you would go down there as an indigent servant, which is like the nice word for slave, but it really is almost worse. And they just sent all these dudes off, and Captain Blood was part of this. So it kind of has this sort of Spartacus thing. Like he gets, he's down there, he gets bought out. But of course, Olivia de Havilland kind of is the one who sort of buys him first, and saves him from her uncle's wrath and whatnot. But in the process, they do sort of have a Spartacus break free where they take power. The Spanish come by. Spanish are always also, the funny thing I always think about, before World War II, before the Nazis existed, if you watch a lot of old movies, the Spanish are like proto-Nazis. And I used to think about that. I'm like, it's hilarious because like they'll make them out like they're so evil. And this movie's not so bad. They're just there. They just like ramsack an English town at one point, which allows Errol Flynn and his crew to sort of escape in the night. But and some of these other ones, like there's the Seahawks, which is one of the oh my gosh, amazing one. But like that one's just like, those dirty Spanish people, blow them out of the waters. But like, I mean, they literally are. They're true Nazis. But I'm like, oh yeah, well, you know why? The Spanish-American War is like the thing that's right before, all this. So that was the last big major war, was that. So of course America's like, yeah, we went across the, the entire world kicking Spain out of their colonies. So of course they're our bad guys. And then once Nazis came by, I always feel like Spain was like, whew, so glad that, thank you Nazis, because you guys, God, everywhere we went, we were always the bad guy in every film, and now you guys are.
It's funny you say that. I mentioned I was doing this Twin Peaks rewatch, and there's a villain character who's introduced in the second season of Twin Peaks. This is back in the 80s or 90s. 80s, 90s, I'm not sure. The 90s, it had to be. And he was South African. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And but then there was this sort of like, as the Cold War with Russia was cooling, and they were no longer, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, they were no longer our main number one bad guy. I think South Africa, like, because remember, isn't it Die Hard?
Oh, Lethal Weapon 3?
Oh yeah, no, that's it. like they were the,
the guy's like, why do you want to go to South Africa? You blick.
So like they were the sort of like the like oh, we could use these guys as the new palatable villain. It's funny to see how like it's a round robin, everybody gets a turn. And it's funny to track, like, oh, what nationality. A thing about Captain Blood. I think the. I'm sorry. Do you want to continue with the recap?
Well, I think that's kind of it. Because from this point on, he goes on his pirate voyages and so on. He's literally a lawless man out on the Caribbean, like a classic pirate story. He abides.
But he has a code. He has principles.
Yes.
He. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, but speaking of the code and all that stuff, because that was also another thing too. Is like I did a big like pirate like kind of. When I was drawing one of the last Pizza Boys when I won this like huge like marathon of pirate history, and the interesting thing is a lot of those pirates. It's like it's literally like the pirates are proto Americans at the end of the day because they were gonna
Okay.
break free of the monarchy. They actually had a lot of equal rights for especially for like the 1600s and 1700s, like because they would look at it like it didn't really matter what your nationality was, what your skin color was, and even between man and woman, they had a lot more equal looks. It's like as long as you can perform, that was the
Right.
key thing. As long as you were a team player, that was more important than anything else. You know, and in the Captain Blood, it sort of has a bit of that there, where he states out this sort of code. You know, probably a little bit more movie code than probably 1600s code. Let's be honest. You know, but it's still, you know what I mean. It's like he's got some rules and regulations going on here for him and his men.
Well, no, but it's a code of ethics that I think uh, because I think there's a scene in about the middle where he is taking his dinner in his pirate captain's cabin. By the way, his suit as Captain Blood is 10 out of 10, no notes. Like it's fully fantastic. I mean, he has a couple of different looks. Is that a wig? I can't tell.
Yeah, because it's one of those ones like it's like because this is like one of those ones. One, this is about the only movie where Errol Flynn has long hair in. Because even when he plays Colonel Custard, he just has slightly. It's not. He doesn't have as long hair as he really has in real life. And it's funny. This is like one of the only movies where he doesn't have a mustache too. It's kind of like. Because that's the thing is like he almost has a completely different look in this film because you're always used to like the literally the classic 30s like mustache of Errol Flynn which I've rocked a handful of times before because it's like one of those ones like it's kind of hard because nobody really knows what you're doing nowadays when you do that like
right. No, I think they get it. Oh, hey, is that John Waters?
Yeah. I was gonna say you're more like it. But then again, if somebody says that they just know their movies really well. Then so I assume the John Waters stuff, they probably know the Errol Flynn stuff.
No, you're getting the reference.
Yeah.
No, so he's in his quarters, which by the way are the size of a Manhattan ballroom, and also like is there a chandelier? I'm not sure, but it is like the inside of a palace, and you do kind of like I was like, well, there's two different versions of being a pirate. One is that you're sort of like an uncouth scallywag of the sea. And the other is that you're the sort of like you're landed gentry on a boat instead. I guess not landed. You're land freed. And I think like this this movie in particular is sort of putting forth this idea of they're good men. Most of the people that he gets sort of when he is sort of brought before the judge for his crime of helping the other guys are proud revolutionaries. So these are fighting men who have a cause and through misfortune end up in the circumstances that he sort of liberates them from when they go to become pirates. So they aren't out there like it isn't the sort of like it isn't the the bad form of piracy. It's good piracy. Like it's a different take on it. And I'm glad that they actually have those kind of distinctions because it allows the movie to have all of the fun of a pirate movie as far as the sort of like those naval battles and people storming the deck and stuff like that. But you don't have to get sort of you can still like your main character and you can still sort of buy the romance. So here's I felt like going into this watching Errol Flynn from kind of go. I'm like, I'm putting in this guy's hand. He's so charming and persuasive. And his performance doesn't feel like this is from a bygone era. It feels you don't have to like switch your head around too much to appreciate it. The person who I struggled with is it Olivia de Havilland?
Olivia de Havilland?
Yeah, and it's not. This is no reflection on the later on when they, so like all sort of like great romances, they start off antagonistically.
Yeah.
He's her slave, and there is a funny scene where she wins him finally, and the guy who her uncle or whatever is like, well, what are you gonna do with him? And she's like, I haven't decided yet.
Yeah, when you buy, yeah, when you have a chance for like 10 pence to buy an Errol Flynn.
Yeah, I know. Like, hey, sorry, Uncle. I think you know exactly what's going on here. And then so like there's a tension between them. Like first, he's her slave, then through a weird set of interesting coincidences, she becomes his slave. And so like they're sparring throughout, and then there's the moment where they're sparring, and she has realized that she loves him, and she's fighting with him, but not, but fighting because she wants to be with him. And her eyes are conveying everything. They're so watery and full of emotion. And I was like, oh, of course, this is what she's great at. Like this is the money shot for these movies to be able to just sort of like, she just looks and you feel everything that she's trying to convey. But I do think that like the character is a little like, I don't think the women do not get to have as much fun. The women actresses do not get to have as much fun as the male actors, and that is the only that's the only part of the movie that felt like
old timey.
Yeah, that was the only part where I was like, wow, this is.
That's okay. You're starting to go into the dark there, anyways. But no, it's not like Cutthroat Island where like you get like the female pirates in there and they get to do just as much swashbuckling and ass kicking and so on.
100%. And I also think like if you were to go back as recently as I think like maybe even the 80s, like I kind of feel like this might be a bias because of my age, but or my love for Star Wars, but I feel like Princess Leia is like one of the first, like the girl gets to hang out with the boys, the girl part gets to be equal opportunity like the boys do. And then I feel like that is just like that snowball has just gotten bigger as it rolls down the, then you get Ripley, and then you get, then you get Kill Bill and so on and so forth. So that is the only thing I would say is I do feel like I loved most of there's a bunch of, I guess, character actors. If you like character actors, is there anything better? Because like these dudes, like you're saying, these guys probably came up on vaudeville. They have those sort of big spongy noses. They have these sort of like elastic features. They have these sort of fun roles that get to like, there's the king with gout who is almost an infant. There's the sort of he's kind of a Falstaff towards the end. Even her shitty uncle, who is kind of a central antagonist. Like a lot of the character actors are sort of like chewing up the scenery in a fun way. Like not in a distracting way. They're getting you through the sort of like the carriage portions of the plot where it's going from A to B or F to G or wherever. But they're good. They're good fun company along the way. So no, I think I went into this thinking like, I wonder how much of it is going to feel not creaky, but of its time. And then I think the thing you were saying, I think you look at this and you see, it's not like this is a proto version. And through the years, they're eventually going to get to the sort of Pirates of the Caribbean. It's not a proto version. It's actually like it's masterful. And then as technology comes along, they're able to incorporate new technology and sort of make all the little pieces work a little bit better. Like during some of the naval battles, I was like, well, there can't be two boats. Could they? I was like, no, of course they're miniatures. And and then you're like, wow, that's because like, did they? And then there's actual boats. Like there's a lot of, and I was like, those can't be. Is there stock footage at this point? Like, does stock footage, like, do they have stock footage libraries yet? Or are they like, did they go out, for this movie and shoot these galleons? Or do they like Warner Brothers from like 1923 like 20 minutes of galleon footage, and they just sort of pulled that and incorporated it in. And then they have like these fun mixes. Like there's a lot of stagecraft that I feel is also vestigial to theater, where there's a lot of set construction built into the scene that, you know, that feels like how I imagine theater, which is sort of like, oh, you look at it and you kind of know instantly. Like it's not a fully constructed thing. It's a flat thing painted to look like it has two sides or what have you. Mm-hmm. So like, there's a lot of set construction that isn't. They're not putting a lot of time making it look like, oh, it's a Potemkin village or whatever. They're just building sets like they would but they incorporate with real scenery, with real, like, it feels like locations, because like some of it was exteriors and stuff. And I thought, like, wow, that's like, it's like you're saying, it's more sophisticated than I thought, and it's the sign that they're actually like kind of super at the top of their game right now. Like it isn't naive, you know what I mean? Like it's accomplished, it's polished, feels like super strong, and it all kind of marries together. Like I think, like, maybe you could say like editing in these films isn't as highly noticeable as it is, like, you know, like I think, you know, after the age of videos, you feel the editor more than you maybe did before, but it's still like competently, you know, like they're working in film. It's composed, you know, like it all comes together really strongly. Yeah, no, it feels like you can watch today and you don't feel like, oh, isn't this charming old antique thing? No, isn't this quaint?
It's like, but there's a lot of camera movements in it. There's a lot of cool angles. As we said, there's so much of like the kind of different special effects and so on they're used in here. I mean, even the director, Michael Curtiz, it's also the dude who did Casablanca. So he's got a big...
Get out, really?
Yeah. So
well, that guy knows a thing or two about making movies.
Yeah, I mean, he also did Yankee Doodle Dandy. He did a few other big ones like that too. So yeah, it's like one of those White Christmas. Yeah, you know, so he's got a lot of stuff on there. You know, even a lot more also like Errol Flynn ones and so on too. Oh, he did the Seahawk? Well, that makes more sense then. But and these was back in those days when people did a lot of movies too. Like, not like nowadays where Tarantino's like, I'm done at 10. This is like, I'm done at 78 when I pass away and die on the side of the...
No, they owe money to the bookie. It's like, make movies or your the guys are going to catch up with you and break your thumbs.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and the interesting thing is, when you think about it, like, you know, these movies, as old as they seem, though, but this is also 40 years into making movies by this point. Because, you know, in a sense, in the late 1800s is when movie making starts, and that's when it's in its simplest form. But that means that there's been 40 years to experiment with stuff, build things up, make an industry out of it, and so on. And once all the technology sort of meets, it's like, you know, the 30s is when all the big stuff. You have sound, you have color, you know, you got all these special effects and builds, and like it all comes together in one moment. It's just like, oh, here we go. This is when movies become, in a sense, what we know is a movie. You know, I think that's why, like, a lot of times you watch 20s movies, and even though I don't get me wrong, I do like a good silent movie, you know, but it is one of those ones like that does feel you're watching something different. You know what I mean? You're almost in a different. You're in a different medium at that point. You know, it's similar, but it's not exactly the same.
It's like opera and a musical. I mean, they're both ostensibly the same thing, but they're very different.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So it's one of those things there. And I think that's where this kind of comes together. And just once again, another thing going with Errol Flynn of like why I think especially actors of this time period are so amazing too, is because this is also the time period where like actors do a lot of their own stunts.
Yeah.
They really become the characters. Like, they all know how to sword fight. They all know how to ride horses. They all know how to, you know, fall and act and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like it makes for these really cool, well-rounded actors that starts to, and I get it, you know, you don't want to have your actor fall off a horse and break his collarbone, and next thing you know, there goes the movie. You know, I know why there's, you know, there is reasons, but there's something so special when you know that the actor's doing the majority of stuff. I mean, I think that's always why, like, a Tom Cruise thing always seems cool. It's like, Tom Cruise is putting his life on the line for you. That's how I
also think like it all marries together, you know, like I think the performance is I can't play the piano. So I always watch when a person is playing a role where they have to play the piano. Like, I guess.
And they do like the flappy hands thing.
Yeah, I'm always curious because like I have a very how do I do this? Podcast, an audible medium. I'm holding up my hand. I have very chubby, pudgy fingers, and the way most piano players play the piano is actually further against, like, closer to the. I would think it's like out here on the edge, but it's actually closer to the inside of the piano, in the little space in between, because there's less far to go to the black keys, and I can't actually fit my fingers between those spaces without hitting both keys. So I watch for that because I'm always intrigued. Like, is this like, did you learn how to play? And I think Tom Cruise did learn how to play piano for a 30-second scene in I don't know if he's going to do a concert, but learned how to play for a 30-second scene in Interview with a Vampire. So he's just, and I think it's not about like, hey, I want to do these death-defying stunts, or maybe it is for him, I don't know, but it is like, hey, I want to have a holistic, cohesive, when somebody watches the movie, all these things, and like on some level, doesn't, like, if you're like, the fencing in these fight scenes is incredible. And if you had to go through 2 or 3, I don't know, weeks of training for that, you're going to just casually, when you're carrying your equipment around, hold it in a different way because you understand it. And I think, like, everything informs the role. And then when you're watching it, all these little subtle cues make it believable.
Mm-hmm. Well, gosh, and even just like with the sword fighting and the fencing and the choreography there, like, this is the other thing that I just love about 30s movies. And Captain Blood, it has about 2 major, I guess, or 1 major sword fight scene, and then a second one with just a little bit of it in there. But it's something that, like, you don't get good sword fighting in movies, like, in a long time. Like, because I'll even use the Pirates of the Caribbean movie just for another pirate one, is the sword fighting in those movies is kind of weak if you think of it from like an editing standpoint. You're like, oh, they edit it together nicely so it looks like it's more intense. But it's not like in these older movies when you see these, like, especially the Basil Rathbone and Errol Flynn when they're fighting on Laguna Beach.
Yeah.
And there's long shots of them, fighting, like, in a sense, like a classic martial arts movie. You know what I mean? Like, a better martial arts movie is not a bunch of editing cuts. It's let's see these guys actually doing their craft, and that makes it feel more believable. Yeah, anybody can, quick edit something together and make it seem like they're doing something really neat.
And speed it up, slow it down, speed it up, slow it down.
Yeah.
I think it's that idea of approaching a fight scene, instead of approaching it as a stunt, approaching it as a dance sequence, approaching it as choreography rather than approaching it as a stunt. And I think that is that's the difference between. I think that's the thing that we kind of imported in from Hong Kong cinema. Is like, oh, the way we're approaching this is. It isn't just the way you film it. It isn't the technique of filming it as much as it is it's choreography. It's,
yes.
Which is, I think, I want to say I heard Quentin Tarantino say he thinks of fight scenes as like the dance number in a movie. And I think like, oh, of course, that is the way to think of it. Like, instead of it being, I think that is the correct approach.
Yeah, I heard this from somebody back, God, a long while ago, and it may have been something like a Tarantino or somebody like that. But someone said something that, like, because like in the pretty much post World War II, that kind of era to about the 60s, musicals were really big, and it was common for, like, a guy who was a World War II vet that could be like, I'm going to the next musical, like, and that was the big thing. And they went there for the dance and choreography and all that kind of stuff, which, nowadays is almost like so far past that point. You're like, you imagine all the veteran guys just like, cartwheeling in to go see a musical now. But then they said, like, what happened is in like the 70s, there was a transition into like the kind of a mix between the action movies and the martial arts movies. But like what kept them going there is, even though it had this like macho man transition thing, is it was the choreography is what like was the main connection that was what hooked them.
Well, there's a bunch of big fight sequences that are like big crowd sequences, and it did feel like, oh, well, this is just 2 steps over from a musical. This is like, because it has the feel of, you have your chorus of 14 to 20 people and they're all sort of like, you know, really what it is, it's the goddess sequence from Showgirls. You know, you have a tableau of 20 different dancers, each doing different dances together, and together they all make this sort of like. So you have these individual fights that are breaking out, and then what you're really just watching is like a big barroom brawl on the deck of a boat.
Yeah, one of my favorite things to do is when there is those big fight sequences in movies and so on, is I love looking at like the background actors and seeing what they're doing. Because sometimes it's like you get like a couple rows back, and then you can see the guys that like they didn't get any direction. They're just kind of swing at each other, like you know, like and it's like almost in some movies you kind of go, it'll be like a real well-made movie or something like that. And you look back like, those guys are smiling at each other as they're kind of like slapping each other across the face. Like,
I thought this one, for as big as the scenes were, was pretty tight. I think because I was watching for that, and I was really amazed at like because like they really did seem to have their own individual stuff going on. Whether it was like one main choreographer making it all work, or individually they had all worked it out, but like there was just a lot of like, if you watch it and break it down, just a lot of little mini stories playing out with all the people. One question this movie left me with, though, these guys are out plundering, getting just dishes and dishes of pieces of 8. Every time you lost a limb, you get a little bonus. Depending on the limb, or
for some reason, if you're left-handed, you're not worth as much. That's
So what are they doing with this money? Like they're on the high seas. There's no Amazon. Like you know,
well, that's why you got, because you know that's the thing is when you're out on a pirate boat, you got to pull your crew into port at some point, because that's all they'll do is they'll go in there and they'll just blow all that money on food, hookers, you know,
bourbon,
rum. Rum. That's like the thing. The funny thing is the gout, like all that stuff, is gout never existed until like, because people just started having rum like it was going out of style. Because once again, this is when people are introduced to sugar. Sugar was not something that you normally had, and you didn't have it in Europe at all, really.
And that's a big Caribbean export, right?
Yeah. So, you know, with Jamaica and everything like that was their big thing is, you know, you had all the cane plants there. You made the rum, and those rum factories were real dangerous. They exploded all the time, too, of course. So, but that's the thing is people down there were just getting like, they had to start sending in doctors because people were just eating junk food like it was going out of style because they just, you know, first time being introduced to sugar, the same way that kind of when the Native Americans were introduced to sugar, when the Americans or the English stuff came over there, they all started getting all these, you know, diabetes and diseases. Where it's like, yeah, you just stop eating that stuff. Like you can't be eating this to them. It's not part of their diet. God.
No, we put out a hummingbird feeder, and you know, it's instead of having to go get a little bit from each flower, they're just mainlining the stuff. And I swear to God, I thought we were getting some pretty chubby hummingbirds. I was like, this might be bad for the ecosystem instead of doing something nice.
Hummingbird's like losing one of its feet or whatever. It's like, that's okay. I don't need the foot.
No, I only fly for 2 hours a day, but I gotta rest.
Yeah, it's like one of those things, but yeah. So you have all that kind of stuff going on there, but that's the main thing is once that money goes, like I think that's the thing is a pirate crew member blows all their cash and then they go back out to sea again.
Right. I was kind of. It seemed like they were getting a lot of money, although pieces of 8, maybe the actual 8 is. A piece of 8 isn't as much as what is it? I only know it from the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. Is it like 8 pieces make $1 or 8 pieces make 100?
Yeah, it might be one of those ones like it kind of would make £1, I guess, because it's British.
Oh yeah, or yeah, whatever the currency is at the time.
And then you get like a 6p and things like that, like all the I guess it's like the change, I guess, of England. I'm not a total expert on the underscore there, but
so as the movie is wrapping up, as Captain Blood, I think he sort of like he takes to the high seas, has sort of like a real like he's the man to lead these people. Mm-hmm. As we mentioned, he falls in love, and it's not just that he falls in love. I think he he starts to kind of yearn for legitimacy. Like the whole reason the woman is the woman.
Well, she's literally like
Arabella.
the only woman in this movie, Fred.
Arabella is a little dismissive of him as sort of like, because he's a pirate in it. Well, I think because she first encounters him as a slave, she thinks he must be kind of a bad dude, and then he becomes a pirate, and so she's always sort of like kind of negging him, even though he's living like a king on the high seas. So I think he kind of like the last act is him hatching this plan kind of to regain stature in the world, just to sort of not free his name or cleanse his name, but like to do a noble act and change the consideration around it, which works perfectly. And then he ends up on top. But as he shifts and starts kind of like, I think longing for both like London or England where he is sort of exiled from, and then not just England, his home, but I think like a home, a stable life, not this sort of merry adventuring. And he loses his heart to this woman. The cast keeps calling him Peter instead of Captain Blood. And I think it's an interesting text thing. Like, I think the text is saying like, oh, no, he's changed, like for a little while he's Peter Blood, and then he's Captain Blood, and then for a while he's Peter again. And I think the text is telling you something about the character, but it is galling every time they say like, that is your captain. You do not call him Peter. Peter? Where are we going? Jamaica?
I feel like all these guys are kind of on like a first name basis with him. Maybe if they were new crew members, but they've been there since the start.
Jeremy Pitt, Jeremy Pitt, they make a lot of hay about their longstanding friendship. Although I would also say like some of the like fun character actor bits, who are the guy who shoots his toe to get a little more money. Those guys, call him Captain, like call him Captain Blood, you scurvy dog.
Yeah, Dr. Blood to you.
I know, right? I didn't spend 13 years in Naval Academy or wherever you go to become a doctor in England.
Well, back in these days, this is like you read like one book and you're a doctor.
Right.
It doesn't take a whole lot. Yeah.
No, he does do some leeching and for the gouty king, and I was like, oh, Captain. So Dr. Blood wasn't just it was both his profession and his specialty.
Exactly. I know. I watched that part. I'm like, oh, I literally have to go on a Saturday to go pretty much get that done, just in the modern version of it. I've got too much iron in my blood, so
prepare the leeches.
I know that's pretty much what it was. The bloodletting. I kind of like joked with the doctor about that when he told me that. I'm like, oh, so like old school bloodletting, like it's the 1600s. He's like, yeah, pretty much. I'm like, awesome. That's what I'm gonna call it from this point on. I gotta drain that bad blood out. Yeah, get that. But yeah, well, what he also learns too is at that point when because they've been out at sea for so long, they don't realize that like the hierarchy's changed in England, and King James has been exiled, and now it's this new Netherlands guy who's moved in. He's supposed to be better. That's what they always say when the king starts off. He's gonna be better. Yeah.
No, they didn't. They jumped immediately to King Richard. Did they call him the? Oh, they had
King
him
James,
like
not King Richard. Yeah, King.
Oh no, the one who replaces him, right?
Yeah.
Or is King James is the bad one, or do I have them reversed?
James is the bad one.
And then the one who replaces him is like, oh, good King Richard. And I was like, he's been on that throne for 30 seconds. Like, give it a little time before you start calling.
Give him time. Believe me, in like 10 years, you guys are all going to be hating him just as much.
No. New king, same as the old king.
Yeah. But like at this point, they're like, you know what? If you come by and you fight again for England, we'll let you guys all be free citizens again. And that's kind of like what it is, So it's kind of like, okay, here's our way to be kind of like, we don't have to be almost in a sense, just these guys lost out at sea, with no home and no country.
Yeah, they're like revenant nomads.
Yeah, fugitives out there on the high waters and so on. So it's like, okay, so we can come back here, but all you gotta do is go literally blow the living daylights out of this like other. I can't remember. Are they English sort of fighting the English like at this point? Like
no, they're the Spanish, aren't they?
Oh yeah, I guess they are fighting the Spanish.
Oh no, I'm sorry. For a little while it's the Spanish, and then it's
Yeah, the
the
Spanish
French,
are
isn't?
earlier in the movie when they do like when the Spanish raid there. Well, no, yeah, because they do go back because they get the town back, Port
Yeah,
Royal, from the Spanish, you know, and they fly their French flags because Basil Rathbone was French, so they're a little bit of this like that in those high seas, it's just treaties and everything changes here and there, but whatever. They just got to go blow the living daylights out of this ship. It gets into a badass not only a man of war ship battle. You also get the pirates swinging on board, lighting things on fire,
yeah.
sword fight. I mean, there's everything great you would expect in a pirate film. This kind of happens in like the glorious finale. There, you get a big action scene, and I love when they kind of come back to like the land that they're on, pretty much Port Royal, where like all these guys were brought in as slaves at the beginning of the movie, and even though it's kind of towards the end of the movie, but it has a great ending where just drew a blank on her name all of a sudden. Olivia de
Arabella.
Havilland. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
Arabella. She's like pulls in like Errol Flynn and whatnot, like hey, well, we're just gonna go in this room and whatnot like that, like it's gonna be okay, and Errol Flynn's got his feet kicked up on the desk. You don't really know what's going on there. He's like, I'll be the new governor of here and everything like that. And then they finally bring the uncle comes back in, like he's like, oh, what's going on here? What's here? Here's like, oh, well, here's the thing. You're gonna have to go talk to the governor. He's not real happy with you just taking off like you did when there was, Spanish and all kinds of stuff that just kind of happened here and stuff like that. He's like, oh, well, I'll have to talk to him. Let me go in there. And when he goes in there, Errol Flynn's kind of got his hands covering his face so he can't see it. And then Olivia de Havilland's kind of like really like chewing scenery, like she's just really like overacting to make it feel like, oh, I was so trying to plead for you, uncle, and everything like that. Try to do your best. And he's like, well, let me see this governor. And then when he turns, it's Errol Flynn lifts his hands up. It's like, oh, now who's my big? No more slave trade here. I mean, this ain't gonna end like Spartacus, where I'm stuck to a cross at the end of the
movie. No, it's a well, because I think throughout the movie there's a lot of those tables getting turned. The slave becomes first he's her slave, then she's his slave. The uncle is first the uncle has the upper hand. Even when they bring him on board a pirate ship as a guest, and they're like, we're taking over this boat. What do you think? What should become of us? Oh, well, I'm going to send a letter of recommendation back and see if we can maybe shorten your sentence. Like, no, dude, I don't think you get it. We are free men now, and you're swimming back to shore.
There's 50 of us here, It's one of those ones. Like, I almost feel like if it was back in the old days, be like, oh no, we're key hauling this guy right now.
Yeah. No. I think they these are gentlemen pirates. So
they're like, you got a nice dash of a swim back for you. Here you go. Hope you took your swim lesson seriously. But no, I just think, just watching this movie over again, like I think from beginning to end, it's so solid. It really is one of my top, probably at least 3 favorite Errol Flynn movies. Like I mean,
it has everything, and I can't speak to this because I haven't seen enough Errol Flynn movies, but like there is something. It's just that like your first introduction to someone, you know what I mean? Where like it's just like the wattage is at 100% right out of the gate, and like there's no question. Like this guy, he's just such a star from the jump. And in every scene, like I said, like there's several scenes in which like he's on the back foot. Fortunes have kind of turned on him. Sometimes actually kind of, I think sort of sad, devastating stuff is happening, but he still has this sort of just like this grin, this bonhomie, this just sort of like, well, you can't keep a good devil down. And I couldn't imagine anybody else pulling that off. And when you see Basil Rathbone, who is a fantastic actor, and I love from the Sherlock Holmes movies.
Yeah.
He is having fun with his character, who is a sort of he gets to do a little mustache twirling, and he gets to do a completely preposterous accent. But there's a difference. Like there's just something like it's like Mozart versus Salieri. There's just like wild magic in Errol Flynn that is like, you just gotta all you can do is sort of like sit back and absorb it in. It's fantastic.
Yeah, no, it's one of those ones, and it's that thing that I just hope more people can go out and check, especially if you just like the idea of pirates. It's like you got to go back to the 30s and 40s. Like I feel like that's the golden age of pirate movies. You know, it's just a plethora of great swashbuckling adventures from like all kinds of actors, from like Tyrone Power, and all of course Basil Rathbone and all sorts of stuff there. Whatever, drawing a blank there, but there's a bunch.
That's not Douglas Fairbanks, is it?
Well, Douglas Fairbanks is great too, but he's mostly all silent movies for the most part.
Oh, right.
And you know what's the other interesting thing about this movie too? I always think about this too, is Olivia de Havilland only passed away 4 years ago.
What? Holy moly!
Yeah.
Well, good for her. You know what? Right on. Good for her.
She lived forever. Where sadly Errol Flynn passed away in 1950 or 50.
Well, that guy,
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is that's
he's burning the candle at both ends.
Yeah, it's just like Humphrey Bogart and all those ones. It's like, yeah, that hard alcohol will get you as time goes on.
Also, I don't, like seeing, I don't, certain people I don't think prosper in the sort of like 80 to the mid 90s. You know what I mean? Like I think especially if you have this sort of like front loaded life where, the first 20 or 30 years is just thrilling. Like I can imagine like the indignities of getting old and your body becoming a wreck and stuff like that. Peace out at 60.
Yeah, well, I think especially for that time period too, that was the thing. It's like, they got to that point. It's like, I'm an old man now. I guess I'm going out to the pasture to, pass away.
No, and also like, to take it back to the beginning of the episode, they don't have those preservatives yet. If he'd have stuck around to the 50s, he would have gotten them.
yeah, exactly. Well, it's weird.
That's adding 20 years to all our lives.
Women seem to last a way long time of the actresses compared to the actors. It's I once again I think it's just it's that heavy hard alcohol. I think it's really what gets them. Cigarettes is one thing, but I think that heavy alcohol gets them even more.
I would also say, go ahead.
I was gonna say, because it's like, these guys are still somewhat pretty active. It's not like they, the lounging days haven't really happened yet. A lot of them are out, diving and swimming and hiking and doing all kinds of those kind of activities. But I think it is just like, when every day involves about, a couple martinis in the morning, couple martinis in the afternoon, couple at nighttime. Yeah, it catches up to you.
No, I think when you're in Olivia de Havilland and you live through an Errol Flynn, or you live through a Spencer Tracy, or you live through a Humphrey Bogart, you can live through anything.
Yeah, definitely. yeah, it's one of those ones, So, but yeah, Captain Blood, totally worth going out and checking out. Of course, there's no real proper way to go stream it if you're looking for it. You could rent it off Amazon or YouTube or something like that. You can look up the DVD. I don't know how much these DVDs might be getting more expensive as time goes on. I don't know how many times they've re-released this one over, but
I think
Warner Brothers, so they might have released it a little bit more than other movies would have.
I would say probably the best way to go, check out eBay and see if there's like a box set, and then grab a couple, like you were saying, Seahawks and obviously Robin Hood is a classic, but like
if you get the box,
I mean, if you're gonna go get 4 or 5, like
yeah. Well, because the thing is, like there's like 3 Errol Flynn box sets that I have, and box set number 1 is like Captain Blood, Seahawks, Robin Hood, like
right, the big hitters.
Yeah, it's got a bunch of them in there. The Dawn Patrol, I think's in there, and so on. And then there's like box set 2, which has a little bit more of like the somewhat lesser ones. And then I have a Western box set one, which I remember that was the one back in the day. Was like the expensive one. It was only like 4 movies, but I remember like I found a guy. I was like, "Hey, would you take $40 for it?" Like, well, it's one of those things. Like, it was not as easy to get, and it was like, and it was more a little bit like the little bit of the lesser like Errol Flynn ones, Because he's got some big westerns too. It's like people think of just like the swashbuckling ones, but he's got a lot of big war movies. He's got a great World War I one called Dawn Patrol's cool. Got some World War II ones, which World War II movies made during World War II are always interesting because they're not really like they're just sort of made up.
Right. We don't know how this is going to resolve.
Yeah, no, so they just kind of make up stuff in there, but it actually makes for interesting movies. And then like Dodge City, which is like, it's one of those ones, if anybody's never seen that movie before, like watch that and you go, oh, this is kind of where all like many other westerns kind of pull from, is this, and especially Blazing Saddles and so on like that, you know. So there's so much stuff that Errol Flynn does, you know, just like overall. But you know, Captain Blood's like, talk about like, I don't know how many actors have that solid of a start. For your first starring role movie, just to be like coming out like on firing on all cylinders, literally being like one of the best movies you've ever done. Like even like, that's the thing is, you think about like Captain Blood, it's like one of those ones. If someone says that's the best Errol Flynn movie, I'm not arguing with that guy. I'm like, you know what I mean? Like logical. That is a logical choice right there. But yeah. Well, Jack, where can everybody find your comic book Gun and all its fun-filled adventures?
Oh, let's see. Where can you find it? You can always go to my website. That's Gun Comic, one word, Gun, bang, guncomic.com. And then it's available in multiple formats. And if you want to read it, you want a digital floppy, if you want digital trades, if you want physical trades, if you want physical floppies. I also like, don't tell anyone, I sneak in some of the other stuff I work on there too. So always check out guncomic.com. I don't know, this is a tricky time for social media because we have, it's like Twitter is sort of, who can say what's going on over there?
Well, you know, I kind of wonder. I was thinking about this the other day. Is because your comic book's called Gun. I bet you couldn't share it on TikTok because TikTok is weird when the word gun shows up.
I don't want to. Yeah, no. Not to get conspiracy theory, but I had a hard time.
I literally just I knew this it wouldn't go, but I shared this. I was like because I was watching Commando again in front of Schwarzenegger, and I just wanted to put the scene where he goes shopping for all the guns, and it's in Los Angeles area. I'm like, in the '80s, when you could just go shopping for like whatever guns you, or I just put the tagline was like shopping for guns in California in the '80s or whatever, and I just made that little scene. And of course, it did well on YouTube Shorts, but then like on TikTok, I knew it was like they're like, nope, we're not putting this up there. You could have it on your page, but that's it because it's got gun in the title.
For the longest time, I had
macho-ness. That's what I said. It's like there's strong drugs and like I'm like, what drugs and alcohol are in here? Like,
well, have you seen the thing they do now is they'll put like scenes of graphic violence and smoking. I'm like, hey.
Yeah, that's what I said. I'm like, there's no smoking in this scene. It's like, he's grabbing a rocket launcher and a lot of heavy machine guns. You know what I mean?
Early on, I used to have gun in my bio, and I had a hard time getting followers. And I took it out and replaced it with just like a hyperlink. You know, like my site is here, without ever using the word gun. And then I think there's 5 or 6 words that. Not 5. I don't know how many.
There's some trigger words for sure.
No, I think like if it looks like you're selling liquor and alcohol, if it looks like you're selling guns, if it looks like you're that kind of stuff, I think they are cautious around it, obviously. So that has been it has been a like I haven't done a lot on TikTok, so I haven't had to jump. I haven't bumped up against that, but. What I have started doing, so everything is sort of under the umbrella of Reckless Eyeballs Press, which was like kind of a way to like give me, you know, like gun can be in one bucket and other stuff that I do can be in another bucket and so on and so forth. And so I just rely on that more now, you know, like Reckless Eyeballs Press, and then hopefully they can find it from there. So the villain at the Villainist on Twitter for as long as that pirate ship stays afloat. And
everything's a pirate ship anymore now.
And you can find me on Instagram. If you go to Instagram, I'm Reckless Eyeballs there, and there's a bio, you know, like a link tree thing. You click on that and it'll take you to all the other things from there. So that's the easiest spot to find me if you're looking. And Spence, man, this, like, watching the movie was fun. This was an absolute delight. Like I said, it's like those old phone conversations. Like podcasting is the new 6-hour phone conversation.
Yeah, exactly. It's just something about it. And just, you know, when you just gotta sit down and talk all about, you know, a classic old fashioned movie with a buddy, it's just, I don't know. That to me is just, it's like my favorite thing, really, at the end of the day. You know?
No, I did not.
I'm just glad that we finally did, you know, something like this because I've been wanting to do this for a very long time, you know, and I know that's gonna be one of those ones like, you know, it's like here's a hard sell. Let's get like people in to watch all these old movies, and who knows? I'm like, I don't care. I just want to do it because that's what I like to do. And it's just like,
no, that's what are the reason for doing anything? Is there?
Yeah, and plus I feel like it fits the Old Man Orange thing. It's like Old Man Orange. So then when people ask, like, why is it called Old Man Orange? Because we talk old movies, dang it,
Right?
Yeah, really old movies, not 1980s old. Like, I could still consider that modern. I don't know about you, but yeah. But yeah, one of those things there. But dude, Jack, thanks for jumping on, everything like that. It was so much fun hanging out a week ago, anyways.
Oh yeah, no, total blast.
We gotta do that more often. Go watch some more. We gotta go watch some movies down at the New Beverly. I think that's gonna be a must.
Yes. And then next time we're down, we got
Beverly, and then we can do a podcast. I'll bring my microphone and everything.
Podcasting live from the New Beverly. And also, next time you're down, we got to get you. We got to do a screening of Wizard People, Dear Readers.
Yes,
it's fun. You'll love it. You will love it. It's a wonderful, like, it's a curio from another time.
Awesome, dude. I can't wait. Well, once again, if you want to find any of the stuff of Old Man Orange, all the classic stuff, you go to oldmanorange.com. That's where you'll find the podcast. You'll find comic books like Pizza Boys. Got those up on there, old animations. I also got a brand new book out that has nothing to do with comic books, even though it's got a little bit of comics in it, I guess. But I got Pull-Ups for Life, a workout book. It's up on Amazon Kindle. Make sure you type in book after you type that in, or you're going to get pull-up diapers. It's the only downfall to the word pull-ups. God, yeah, it's like one of those ones, like, it's like trying to outbeat that company. Their marketing is pretty intense. But yeah, Pull-Ups for Life book, if you kind of want a little workout, kind of fun-filled, motivational journey. As I said, I put some comics in there. I still make it kind of fun, funny, motivating. It's one of those things I just always wanted to do. I feel like that's where I'm at this life. I'm just doing all the projects I kind of want to do. I'm like, if I feel like doing, I'm just gonna do it. I don't care. We're gonna talk old movies. Gonna do it. We're gonna do a workout. You're gonna do it.
This is a volunteer army. It doesn't make sense to do anything less than this is like, and also like, hey, it's getting late. Like tick tock. If you want to do it and you're not doing it, you're gonna run out of time.
I hate to start. I try to make sure every one of my days is fulfilled to the maximum as I possibly. I just think that's it. I literally think, I'm like, you know what? I might not wake up tomorrow. You know what I mean? Errol Flynn only lived to 50, so you know what I mean. we got to make sure we live every day like a glorious adventure, the way that our swashbuckling hero Errol Flynn would have done it. Come on, boys. Smile with every scene you do. Even if you're in prison, you still keep that smile going. The man slaps you across the face. There are so many life lessons to have from good old Captain Blood. But Jack, you're gonna have to come on much more often, especially now. I'm gonna need somebody here and there. You know what I mean? I'm gonna call on you, and we'll talk some more classic films and go from there. But till then, I'm Spencer Scott Holmes with new special guest.
I'm Old Man Jack Foster.
Oh yeah, we got the old man Spencer Holmes and old man Jack Foster, and continuing on the Old Man Orange legacy into the next section for a good while. So tune back in. We'll have all kinds of fun stuff. But yeah, till then, see you guys all later.
See you at the movies.